Ho ho ho! Welcome back to the Educated Home Snap channel. How you doing? So it is 2025, new year. Hope you guys had a wonderful holiday, maybe holiday break for some of you, and hopefully the next year, this year will be fantastic for you all. Wishing you guys the best, and hopefully same thing for Second Dinner and Marvel Snap. Hopefully they have a good year as well. Want to show off something I got. Look at this. It's a gigantic card. I actually did not get this for a Christmas present, but I went to like a magic event and I got one of these. They were very cool, so like it's double sided too. Oh my god. Anyways, I've been bragging about this. So I figured I'd show you guys. But we do have some Marvel Snap cards to talk about. Let's get started. So we do have the January spotlights. The tiers are still the same, S through D. S being very strong, A also very good, B also very strong, C a little bit lower. You have to really like the card or the spotlights or so, but generally they're all pretty good. And at the end of the day, the cards that are fun for you, the cards that you want to play should be the highest rated for you guys, right? Like, so I'm just giving you like general advice, but you can definitely ignore me and choose and pick what your heart desires, because that's what really matters. So we always talk about the season pass card. We do have Iron Patriot. For this season pass, it's an on reveal, add a random 4, 5, or 6 cost card to your hand. And then if you're winning here after next turn, you'll give it -4 cost. So it's kind of like Victoria to me, where Victoria gives you a 6 cost and -2 cost and 2 power. This one you can also get a 6 cost, but it's not guaranteed to be -2 cost, but you can get -4 cost, but you also have to be winning next turn. So you have one turn to essentially win the lane, and then if you do, you're getting a big payoff. Now, I think there is the risk of you can lose the lane, and if you play this card, obviously your opponent's going to be like, okay, time to mess them up, time to play my big power here. However, you can do the same thing, and the main strength is where you're going to play, your opponent does not. Where turn 1, you could play something like Hydro Bob is probably the obvious, like, hey, but then they could snap you and then they could move, right? So like maybe Hydro Bob isn't but then again, if they're snapping you, maybe like that's fine. And you can also play Hydro Bob turn 3 after you've committed, so that one is a lot harder to predict, and you'll know if they're snapping or not. However, you can play something on 1 regardless, and then you can play this into the same lane. And I don't think most players are going to be like stacking a lane turn 1 and 2, so you'll probably have an advantage there. And then as long as you have a 3 cost that's reasonable, you can very freely win the lane. Now, having the consistency of drawing your 1, 2, and 3, not always going to be there. However, you can build your deck to be maybe lower curved so that the consistency is much higher. However, what I'm saying is, if you do get that payoff, this is a really powerful card. You can get a 4 cost for 0, 5 cost for 1, 6 cost for 2. All those are very great breakpoints. And even though the card is random, you're not going to know exactly what you are getting. Most of the time, you're going to be getting something that's pretty reasonable. Kind of when some of the locations that give you like a free low cost power bomb, it's usually pretty effective. And you can definitely do that for Iron Patriot. The base stats are pretty good, and generally, it's not a high-risk card. You're always going to get the card anyway, so it's kind of like a Sentry, where sometimes you get like a super souped-up like payoff, but sometimes you just get an extra card in your hand, which is sometimes relevant as well, right? Maybe Dino or whatever you're doing. So overall, I do think this is a pretty good card, pretty strong. It has the potential to win you games, which is just something that's very strong to have for every card. If every card you're playing has the potential to win you games, then you're going to be winning more games because you open up those chances to win play after play, right? Kind of like Shang-Chi, right? Potential to win you games. Shadow King, all those tech cards. And it has good synergies. I think it has pretty powerful stuff. So the discount will stack or so if you're playing things like Moon Girl, right? You'll get another version of it, same stack, kind of like She-Hulk stuff. And Frigga, I don't see a lot of people using Frigga, but this is like the type of card that I think Frigga could really do well with. Where if you get like a 1 cost 5 drop, you play it into with Frigga, then boom, you get that 1 cost 5 cost again, right? And that's just a very powerful thing to have. So I think there's pretty good synergies with Iron Patriot. It has good base and it can win you games. So this is the type of card I think is probably going to stand the test of time and be pretty good. So don't really have any issues with this card whatsoever. And if you want to get it, feel free. And then we do have the spotlights. We also have spotlight discussion. So next up, coming up is Victoria Hand. Pretty simple card, ongoing. The cards that are created in your hand have +2 power. Obviously, it ties back into Patriot, the Iron Patriot, where it'll create a card in your hand, and you play Frigga, it'll give it +2 power. So that's a nice little combo. I think this card is particularly powerful just because it has a very open-ended, flexible ability where you can combo this with Mystique, and then the cards you're created have +4 power, which is just, in my opinion, kind of oppressive if you can play around that. And you can make copies of it Frigga as well. So you can just have like a lot of copies of hand if you want. Moon Girl can do the same thing. So there's a very good chance if you fully invest into this particular card, you can have easy payoff where everything you're playing is getting +4. And Kate Bishop, there's a lot of low cost generators hood that you can just have in your hand as well. And you're like, Kate Bishop gives you two cards. Hopefully you don't get even if you get the Goblin one, it doesn't matter. Like, it's not on your board anyway, so you're still pretty good. And that's the best one to get anyways. So just feels like a pretty powerful card. In my opinion, I think it's the best of the Spotlight season, but there's a pretty good amount of new cards being added this season, so maybe not. But when we look at the Spotlight itself, we haven't had S tier, in my opinion, for a long time, and I just wasn't impressed by the Spotlights these last couple of months. But this one I actually think is quite good, pretty good. Victoria Hand, I think, is one of the better cards being released this season. Then you have Grandmaster. I do think the buff to the stats of Grandmaster actually mattered quite a bit, and now it actually sees play, and it's just like a good card that has the opportunity to be very strong. So Grandmaster with the buff 2/3 baseline, just really strong card. People are playing in discard, which is pretty popular, but I've seen some other decks clog and so pop up. And I'm also a pretty big Hawkeye fan, or not the regular the Kate Bishop Hawkeye fan, where the cards it summons are pretty good and it synergizes into the hand, right? So they don't always do this where they add synergistic cards as a spotlight together. But here, Hawkeye and Victoria Hand, I think, are probably. I think Kate Bishop is like the best card to play with hand. So it makes a lot of sense for them to be together, and it makes the spotlight a little bit better, in my opinion. And then Grandmaster, you can also play with this deck too if you want to copy Kate Bishop or Hood or something like that. You could do that too. So they all kind of work together, but I think they're all high quality cards to pick up. None of them are like very old cards. They're all under a year. So just seems a pretty good spotlight, especially if you're missing all three to pick up. Even if you're missing just one, I still think this is a pretty high spotlight to pick up. And even if you just want hand itself, I'm pretty high on hand. So I had her in C, but I was like, that felt wrong to me. So I bumped her up to like B- essentially. So overall, pretty respectable spotlight. I just realized I did not change I always mess something up. I did not change the dates. This is not December, right? That was last season. It's supposed to be January. But hey, I'm gonna move on. You guys know the dates. It's coming out in a week or so. Next up, we have Moonstone. So Moonstone has the ongoing effects of your 1, 2, or 3 cost cards here. Obviously, you can combo to Victoria Hand if you want to do that. You can also, hear me out, you can also go Victoria Hand, Mystique, Moonstone. Huh? That seems so messed up to me. Your created cards have +8. Yo, like, why? And then the Onslaught at the end just to be a meanie. But anyways. You can do that if you want to, but generally, I think this is the type of card that's going to really see a lot of play once Sam Wilson comes out. So we kind of have to talk about that one a little bit. So this is like a into the future, but it adds a Captain Shield to a random location, which is like a 1/1. It can't be destroyed, right? So you can't kill Monger the Shield, but it gives your Cap 2 power when it moves to Captain's location. So you can move the shield, and then when you move it to the Captain's location, it's going to give give extra power. Now, I think this is going to be good with Moonstone because you're probably going to be playing like Captain America and other ongoings. So I think there's going to be a pretty big ongoing meta. And when that happens, Moonstone being able to copy all your ongoings is going to be really strong. So right now, I'm like, it's a good card, but it doesn't have the highest potential. However, if you think you're going to want this once Sam Wilson comes out, it's an absolutely good reason to pick up this card. So that's like my caveat. So when you look at the ratings, it's not super high, but I just don't think it's that crazy right now. But once, like into the future, I think it's going to be a lot better. Now, do you want to spend tokens now for the potential for the future? Some people would, right? And if that's something you're willing to do, feel free. But if you just want power now, I do think there are better options. Though obviously with Victoria Hand, there's some cool combos you can do. So this isn't a bad card, but I just think like, hey, you're going to have to wait a little bit to really see the payoff, in my opinion, for this card. Now, something to just as this is a random aside, I don't like these the Spotlight variants for Black Swan and Nocturne. This is maybe personal opinion, but I'm looking at these variants right, and I have to look like a bit like a full screen, to download the image files and whatnot, and I'm just like normally the Spotlight variants are like up here, but these two I'm really like not a fan. So it's just bias here, but let me know if that's something you guys agree with or not. Anyways, but Black Swan Nocturne are definitely lower priority of cards to get. Like Nocturne used to be one of the best 3 drops. It was like you change locations, you can move it. It was super flexible, but they nerfed the power off of it, and that did matter. And now you have like pretty good replacements. Rocket and Groot, probably the new king in town, is doing a lot of work, but there's still other 3-cost moves. So you don't really need to pick up Nocturne. It isn't like an auto include in decks that it used to be. So not the biggest like, oh, you have to get this type card. And then Black Swan is okay, but there are other ways to play low cost decks that have a lot of 1-cost cards, right? Bounce probably being the easiest way to do it, and you just use Beast and the other synergies. So you don't really need Black Swan. So I'm not super high on both of the cards Moonstone is next to, and that just makes the Spotlight a little bit weaker. It is all Series 5 cards, and they're all pretty recent. None of them are over a year old, so it's got that going for itself. But you're essentially, for me, I think, picking up Moonstone for a future season. So maybe once a future season, you're like, damn, I really wish I had Moonstone, right? But right now, like, you can probably get away with it. But keep that in mind. Next up, we have Bullseye. So Bullseye 3/3, kind of basic base, but has Activate card, which can be risky, right? Activates tend to have consistency issues because if you draw them later, they don't do anything. So obviously, the lower cost the activate, the easier it is to just kind of squeeze in and feel fine. But in 3 cost is probably like the standard. Like this is probably okay. So activate, discard all cards that cost 1 or less from your hand. So it's kind of a discard effect already, and then you afflict that many different enemy cards with -2 power. So essentially, the idea is you have a bunch of low cost cards in your hand, and then you activate, discard everything, and you hurt your opponent, and then you laugh in their face. And I do think the potential for that is super high. Probably the best card to use this with is Swarm, because Swarm, every time you discard it, you'll get 2 copies. So it's it's very doable to have a full hand of swarms, just nothing but swarms, or like 4 swarms even, and that's pretty powerful. If you have 4 swarms, you discard them all. That's -8 power, so it becomes a 311. And Scorn is another very easy target where you discard that, it gets 2 power, and it buffs your board, so it's also a pretty effective use case. I don't know if you're going to be running like random ones or zeros just to have it get discarded by Bullseye. It feels like that's too much investment for this type of card. But I do think running any discard decks, there's probably a weak as discard card you can replace with Bullseye that's running Swarm and Scorn and just have that fit in perfectly. So I think this card's pretty good if you're running discard or like discard. It gives you a new way of winning the late game, and it can also like fix your, like, it's weird if you're running Swarm and Scorn, but if you're not and you have like Dracula, this can fix the targets. So there are other ways of using it that's pretty good, but I do think most of the time you're probably just going to be wanting to use as a swarm target. So when we look at the spotlights, we do have some pretty good ones here. Kyra and Marvel Boy, those are pretty zoo specific. I would say Kyra you can play with like big cards, but most people just play her with zoo stuff, and then Marvel Boy also. So at least with these spotlights, there seems to be a theme of running or adding those synergistic cards together, because you can definitely play Kyra and Marvel Boy in the same deck, and they usually go in the same deck. So this seems pretty good. Bullseye doesn't really fit the theme. I wouldn't say, like, because Bullseye is a discard card, so you're not really playing discard in Zoo. I haven't really seen that kind of thing. So, but I do think Kyra and Marvel Boy, those are pretty powerful cards. They do see play. So if you like Zoo and you're missing both of them, this is a pretty nice time to pick them up. So if you're missing both, you want to play Zoo, pretty good tier. I would definitely recommend it. And the card isn't bad itself. So if you are missing one or the other, that's also still pretty good to pick up. They're generally strong cards that see play depending on the meta. And Bullseye itself, you have to be a discard fan, but discard people know who they are. And if you want to play discard, you can add this up. I wouldn't say this is like a core discard card that you have to play or you have to pick up if you want to do discard. Like kind of like X23 is like core destroy. I wouldn't say this is core, but it's a pretty nice angle and a new way of having a discard payoff that seems pretty strong. So definitely recommend the Spotlight as well if you're missing or want any of these cards. Last up, we have Ares. So this is a nod to the war card game, in my opinion, where you compare the power of your top 3 cards, and if your total is higher, you win. And if you win, you get +6 power, which is essentially double his power. I think double his power is crazy. Well, not crazy, but like would be very strong. So I think +6 makes a lot of sense. So this is essentially a 412. Not a 420, but a 412. So it's pretty good. And it reminds me of the Thanos synergistic card when it came out. It was like a 410 dude like played next to one cost cards, and I was like, oh, that's not going to be that important. Turns out it was like the best card of the season. Yeah, just cause like, hey, it's a big boy that's simple to play, and it's a 410, and that was amazing. There's a little bit more 410s now, so it's not the only one. But 412, I don't even think we have a 411, like a straight 411 in the game. So this is just going straight to 412. So I'm pretty high on this card just due to history. It's just a 412, and that's like big stats, and people like big stats. So I think the card is like similar to Victoria Hand and power level, just like, hey, this is a strong card. Now, the cards that's next to I'm not as high on, and I don't really think they affect the level of the Spotlight itself. Kang right now, not great. Really never been great. I really wonder if there's going to be a Kang rework, right? Because they've never put Kang in a. At least I don't remember them putting Kang in a Spotlight. Maybe they did, right? But I don't remember it. And Misery is okay. It's like missing something, you know? Like that's my opinion. Like the card is missing like a real synergistic hook where like, oh, you have this, you play with Misery, it's insane. There's none of that in my opinion. That's like so clear. So that's like my issue with the card right now. And Kang is just like awkward, and some people use it to meme, but you're memeing essentially, and it doesn't necessarily win you games too much. I'm I'm still standing, but I'd rather it be in this position than oppressively long, where you play with tons of Kangs and you're always going back in time, and it takes so long. Every game is long, and there's two Kang players in the game. Like, I prefer it not existing over the world where everyone is playing Kang. So yeah, at least in this iteration. So we'll see if there's a Kang rework, and that might change the level of the tiers. But for now, I'm gonna rate it how I see it, and essentially, you're just picking up this spotlight just for Ares, just for a 412. Not always. It's not always gonna be a 412, but I think if you're playing Ares, you're gonna have higher tier units. You can play with Surtur and stuff like that. So it's not it's pretty easy to have it where you're bigger than your opponent. So in that world, right, it just seems like a very strong card. 412 is just like, I'm gonna win with that. So just seems pretty strong, pretty good to me. So if you want Ares, feel free. It looks strong. So overall, those are the spotlights for this particular season. Honestly, I would say this has been like a better spotlight season for me than some of the previous ones. At least we have something that looks very appealing to me, S tier, and then a lot of the cards. I think all the cards are pretty strong. Moonstone seems good. Bullseye seems good. Ares seems strong. So there isn't really anything that's like, oh my god, these are weak. And then the spotlights, I was looking for some super old ones. Kang was the one that hit, and Kyra barely is a year old. It's like slightly older than a year. So, and everything else was released in 2024. So pretty good. So all things considered, pretty happy with the spotlights. I do think there's some really powerful cards coming out in the future. So we'll have to see if like, hey, these are gonna stand up. But they all look pretty good to me. So that's my thoughts on this season. Hope you guys have a wonderful holiday season. Take care of yourselves and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Educated calling snap. Once you watch him, you won't go back. He'll teach you to marvel snap. Your skills will be